Garden of Eden. Yo, what's up? It's someone that's someone, and welcome back to today's report. Today's report was sent in by Zam. When this happened, July 2nd, 2020. The drugs used, Brugmansia and Cannabis, at a dose of 3 2-inch leaves and 2 4-inch leaves. The route administration, orally. Gender, male. Weight, 180 pounds. Age, 26. Height, 6 feet. For his prior experience, he's tried one small leaf before and then smoked one flower. For his set, he notes, optimistic, relaxed, just finished working on a large project, looking for a mind-altering experience. And for the setting, he notes, suburban neighborhood, sunny afternoon in the summer, clear skies, suburban house on a cul-de-sac with a close friend and girlfriend. Okay, so today, we have quite the experience containing Brugmansia, Angel's Trumpet. This is part of the same family as the Torah and contains a lot of the same alkaloids. Zam somewhat casually steps into this experience, as when he tests the waters, he doesn't really get many effects. But here, he ends up in a pretty delirious mess where he ends up fearing for his life, that he might suffer from brain damage or end up in a coma. Thankfully, he has his girlfriend and friend around to watch him, and this doesn't end up being a disaster experience. Regardless though, this experience does paint the darkness that lies within this plant. It shows how rough it can be, especially physically. This is a pretty eventful report with many hallucinations, and one I'm sure you'll enjoy. So without further ado, let's dive right into this. One day, I was walking near my house and walked down a street where I knew a few Brugmansia plants were growing in someone's front yard. I picked a small, young leaf out the top of the largest plants, chewed it up a bit, and left it under my tongue to absorb subliminally. I then walked to a park and meditated a bit. I thought I could feel a vague effect, but wasn't sure. When I left the park, I walked back past the plants and picked and chewed another small young leaf on my way home. I thought I had some slight euphoria. Also, my skin felt somewhat itchy and had the smallest amount of dryness. Both symptoms I knew were associated with the Torah and Brugmansia. Still though, I wasn't sure how much was just a placebo. A few days later, after reading more about different ways to administer the plant, I walked back down the same street, and this time, I collected one flower that had fallen off the largest plant and dried on the soil. I put this flower in my bag and walked back home. I made a pipe by poking holes in an orange. The pipe had a small bowl, so I had to keep packing and repacking the bowl with crushed pieces of the flower. It felt almost nauseating to inhale the smoke. After I had smoked the whole flower in my backyard, I went inside and laid on the couch. I definitely felt the onset of a relaxing body high, but from what I could tell, had very little visual or perceptual effects. Mostly, I just zoned out with this heavy relaxed body high and watched some YouTube videos. After around 20 minutes, I stood up to get some water, and this is when I really noticed how sedated I felt. My skin felt more sensitive than usual, but at the same time, I felt a slow, earthy calm, and a subtle absence of thought. This lasted for around an hour, as it slowly wore off. July 2nd, 2020. About 1 week later, I was walking around the neighborhood with my friend. Let's call him Kevin. It was near a full moon, and I had read that the levels of active chemicals in Brugmansia rise and fall with the moon. I mentioned to Kevin that there was a plant a few blocks over that you could trip on. Kevin isn't that interested in drugs, but he still went with me to the Brugmansia plants. Again, I poked a young, light green leaf off the plant and chewed on it. This time, I swallowed it. We walked to the park. There is something about the taste of Brugmansia leaves that really lets you know it is full of potent chemicals. We sat for a few minutes at the park, and even though it wasn't enough time for the leaf to be absorbed in my stomach, I could still feel that relaxed, almost empty feeling again. Something about that feeling is very attractive to me. I decided I want to eat more of it. At this point, I don't think Kevin fully believed that the plant did anything at all, so he scanned it with an app that identifies plants. As he was scanning it, I ate 2 more small leaves, and maybe because he was becoming interested, he picked 2 leaves as well, but didn't eat them. He started reading that it was called Angel's Trumpet, another name for Brugmansia. He noted that it is highly toxic and can cause death. At this point, I think he started to worry and asked me if I was feeling okay. The effects were still mild, and I wasn't fully sure they were just a placebo. We started walking back to my house, and I asked him if he was going to eat the 2 leaves he picked. They were about 3.5 to 4 inches long, much larger than the small young ones I had been eating, and also darker green. He said no, and so I asked him if I can have them. He said, "Are you sure I can give you these?" and then reluctantly handed them to me. I rolled them up into a tight cylinder and started chewing. The taste was very strong. I had to pick a plum off a nearby tree to chase the taste with. The walk back was about 15 minutes. Kevin works in real estate, so he's always stopping at random houses and asking the owners if they want to sell. He was stopped at a house, so I decided to walk back home before him. I was starting to think that I had just imagined the effects because nothing was changing that much. I got back home and walked into my room where my girlfriend was lying in bed. This is the first moment where something felt strange. She looked at me like something about me was different. She asked if I was okay and then said, "What happened to your eye? It's really red." I was guessing I had touched my eye after handling the leaves and some of the poison had gotten into my eye. I think I flushed my eye out with water after that. I lay down next to my girlfriend. The relaxed body high sensation started to increase. Also, my speech became a little impaired and things were slightly different perceptually. Still, all the effects seemed mild and were mostly producing a giggly, relaxed high. I'm not sure how long I was chilling with my girlfriend for when she asked if my friend Kevin was still here. I thought I should go into the living room and check, so I got up. Standing up was difficult. It felt like weights had been strapped to my body and my legs were made of jello. Walking to the door felt like I was wading through water, and I had to shuffle my feet across the ground to move. The effects at this time, however, didn't feel much more significant than being moderately to heavily drunk, so I wasn't startled. I walked into the living room and attempted to act normal while interacting with Kevin. This was impossible. He was sitting at the dining table, and I just collapsed into a chair and burst out laughing. My speech was slurred, and everything felt like it was slowed down. The feeling was still manageable and also felt similar to being drunk, but I started to be in disbelief at how much these plant leaves were affecting me. Kevin took a picture of me with his laptop and sent it to his girlfriend, who said I looked swollen. My skin had a reddish hue and my face looked puffy. The body sensation of being weighed down and pulled into a sleep state started to get intense. In a moment of bravado, I stood up, shuffled over to the packed bong on the fireplace, and took a bong rip. I told Kevin that I needed to just go to sleep as my body sensations were getting so strong. My perception more and more felt like I was in a dream. I waddled back into my room. I said something to my girlfriend about needing to sleep, and my speech felt heavily impaired and altered. I lay down. I fell asleep instantly and also started dreaming instantly. The dream was 100% realistic, and I was in an auto parts store surrounded by people of South American heritage. I opened my eyes and looked at my girlfriend, but couldn't move at all. The scene in my room was no more or less real than what I would see when I closed my eyes again and slipped back into whatever dream. Again, I opened my eyes and couldn't move. I had to jerk myself awake to move. I looked into my girlfriend's face, and this was the most terrifying experience of my life. There she was, and there was my room, but it completely looked like a dream, and it totally didn't seem real. This is when the overwhelming feeling that I had fucked up washed over me. I started feeling all the symptoms I had read would happen when taking the Torah and Brugmansia. My mouth was as dry as a desert, drier than anything I had ever experienced. It was like the mouth of a corpse. My skin felt hot, itchy, tight, and it was a reddish yellow. The room seemed dark and sinister, like something impossibly evil was there. I stood up and started seizing. The tremors would just shake through my body with no remorse. I stumbled to the bathroom and profusely vomited in the toilet 8 or 9 times. I remember realizing that, even though I had vomited, so much poison was already in my system that I might die. I just knelt there in front of the toilet, literally praying for my life as my entire reality crumbled around me. The sensation of being pulled into a permanent death sleep was so strong that I was convinced that if I fell asleep, I would go into a coma and die. I stood up and told my girlfriend in my garbled, barely functioning speech that I wanted to go walk around outside so I would keep from passing out and dying. I kept shaking and having muscle spasms as I put on my jacket. It was getting dark now, and my girlfriend and I walked outside. I saw Kevin drive off in his car as he said, "Looking good," which totally confused me because I felt like hell. While he made me feel a bit better until I took a step onto a concrete square on the sidewalk, and the square sunk down into the earth about 1.5 feet and made it sound like an old stone button moving in like a trapdoor in Indiana Jones. As soon as this happened, I stumbled and a sense of terror flowed over me. I looked back and the concrete square hadn't moved. I looked down the street and can see black shadowy beast moving around in someone's front yard. The whole sidewalk was covered in a shimmering translucent gel honeycomb that turned into cheetah spots and other shapes as it connected to trees and bushes growing out of the ground. Everyone I saw looked like they were walking around like zombies or they were dead. I crossed the street and the black asphalt looked like an infinite void into hell, full of tiny white lines forming weird tightly knit geometry. Every couple of minutes, one or the other of my legs would go out and I would almost fall, losing complete control of my body. I started thinking that there were interdimensional entities around me and they were waiting for me to die so they could steal my body. I had to stop in the middle of the sidewalk and meditate while making mudra shapes with my hands to create an energy field around my body and keep from dying. I continued around the block, back to my house, and pretty much felt like a 90-year-old man with severe dementia going for a walk. I got back home and I lost perception of time. My phone said it was 10:30 p.m. and the effects were still very strong. At one point, I was sitting on my couch, wishing it would stop, when I noticed my hands were really swollen, to the point where I could barely close my fist. I thought that the effects might actually be getting stronger, so I peed more and drank more. This is when I realized I couldn't pee, and my penis had shrunk in size considerably. Not being able to pee at all when you know your bladder is full is one of the most terrifying and painful experiences. After excruciating effort, I was able to dribble out a few drops of pee. It was probably around 11 p.m. when I called the poison control hotline and asked if I was going to die. The guy didn't seem too concerned and said something like, "People do this every day." I still wanted to stay awake because I thought I was going to die if I went to sleep, but my girlfriend said she would watch me and make sure I didn't stop breathing, so I decided to just lay down and try to go to sleep. Besides having to get up a few times to take an agonizing leak, one of the last things I remember was lying in bed, looking close up at my fingers, and seeing all these little white fibers dancing around on my skin. The more I looked, the more I realized my whole body was made of these little thin, flickering white, hair-like fibers. I closed my eyes, and instead of the usual dream visuals, I only saw a few things. Staticky images flashing in a small area of my vision, while the rest was just a jet black. I wondered if these were my last brain cells dying, and if I was going to be impaired forever. As I fell asleep, I kept having vivid dreams of lying in bed, looking at my phone, or thinking that my girlfriend's hand was on my hand, and it had gone totally numb, or thinking my girlfriend was someone else. When I woke up the next day, I felt pretty much normal. Actually, I felt sort of refreshed, and my skin seemed rejuvenated. A few days later, I was able to take and pass a real estate exam, so I don't think I permanently damaged my brain. My girlfriend was obviously distraught with witnessing my near demise. I promised her I'd never eat Brugmansia again. However, as the weeks passed, and I kept reading more about it, I couldn't curb my interest. For the past few days, I've been walking by the plants in my neighborhood and eating 1 or 2 small young leaves, just enough to get the medicinal effect.